Hello and welcome to this very course. In this very video, I'll be teaching you about the lasso tool. We have three of them: the lasso tool, the polygonal lasso tool, and the magnetic lasso tool. The shortcut to selecting any of this tool is by pressing L on your keyboard. And if you have any selected and you want to change them, you can just simply press Shift and L on your keyboard and it changes automatically. Just like that. Okay, when you press Shift and you select, it changes. Now we're going to start with the lasso tool, the first one on your list. Now the lasso tool is used for selection of the very subjects with which you are working on, or any object on your image that you want to select. Now for the very first one, you select by means of clicking and dragging. So you click a single point and then you drag and return it back to the point where you started. It joins automatically, or you release it, it joins automatically. Okay, like every other selection tool, you can add to this selection. So we have the add, we have the minus, and we have the intersect. So we can add. When we select add, we come and then add to this. By adding, it doesn't deselect the very first one, it adds to it. But if it is not on that very option of add, you wouldn't be able to add. Okay, you can also minus. For example, let's assume this is actually way outside the subject we want to select. So you can come and select outwards, and then it minuses that for you. You can also come here and minus this, and it minuses for you. Okay, so let's add the rest of the subject and finalize this very image. Now you can do quite a lot of things after selection that we're going to be learning over time, but then just master this tool. Okay, now we've successfully selected this image. We have a little extension here that we want to subtract, so you can also subtract. So you subtract. Now one of the disadvantages of this tool is that it is one-time click, and then you have to drag perfectly around your subject. If you don't know how to drag perfectly around your subject, if you don't have that precision, you would tend to waste more time working on it, of course, but it is handy. And so you can always use it, for different kind of purposes. Okay, and so for this we can actually feather, if you want to feather, so you can have a more realistic edge. Okay, but if you don't feather, so let's save the selection so we can check what the two of them would look like. We're going to feather one, so we'll save our selection. When you click save selection, you just give it a name. So let's give it a name A. All right, and then we duplicate. This is going to be layer via copy, or Control J on the key on the Windows. Okay, so we're gonna have and this is a new layer we just added. So not feathered, we're going to name it not feathered. All right, so we will also load the selection. Right click and then click load selection, and you look for the name you just created, and that is A, and then you click OK. It loads the selection we made before. So we come back here and then we select the background layer and come right here and feather this time around. So you can feather from here, but this will apply when before you begin selection. But if after you've selected, then you have to right click and feather from the very image. So we feather here, we feather by maybe say 3, so we can actually check the differences. So right click and do same thing, layer via copy, or Control J on the PC, on the Windows. Okay, all right, so let's come here and see what the differences look like. Want to see what the differences look like. Okay, let's zoom closely. This is what was feathered and this wasn't feathered. You see, this is very sharp and this looks a little more realistic, because in the real world, when you shoot with cameras, the edges are not as sharp as this. Okay, and it also adds hides some of your errors. Now let's try some of the other tools, and we proceed. So group this layer and Control G to group and name it Lasso Tool. This is our lasso tool. Okay, so we go to the next layer. We hide the black layer first and then come back to the original layer. Let's hide what we've done for the lasso tool so we can back to background layer. And so back to the background layer, we come select the next tool we want to use is a magnetic lasso tool. So magnetic lasso tool, what it does is that you click one time, okay, but you don't need to hold and drag. This time around, you just move your mouse. You don't click and drag. You just click once and hold and move your mouse, okay. If you want to anchor at any point, you can also click to anchor, and then it creates an anchor for you, but it traces the edges for you, okay. And so if for any reason you see the way I did this move, it's not very good, so what you need to do, you can press your space bar so it can change to the hand button, and then you can pan the image, okay. So you move around this way and pan and move, and as space bar you pan and then you move, okay. When you get to that very spot, you double click or you click at the very spot you began. You see a round round icon just below your tool, and that icon actually shows that you're ready to join. So once you click, it joins. Now you see this is a little rough, but then we can always modify. Like I told you, you can add, you can subtract. So for this, we want to subtract those ones outside the subject. So we come click and move, click and move, click and move, and return back and double click, and then we join, okay. And then we want to add these other ones that are inside. So you click and move, click and move, click and move around where you want to add, and so you zoom a little lower and then click and move, 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 okay, and then click and move, and then you join. Now because it's controlling what we're doing here, we couldn't still move to those edges, but then of course it's still handy. You click, you move, you click, you move, click, you move, and then you join. Now it's adding, so you can see that our work is becoming more and more beautiful as we proceed. Our selection actually is becoming more and more beautiful. So this is a very beautiful job. You can also feather like we actually practiced. Feather is a little better, more realistic, and then you Ctrl J on the PC, okay, and click, sorry, just right click and layer copy, okay, and then you have that. So you can actually bring it up over this, and then let's on the black layer and see what it looks like. And that's a very good one. Now with this, you can actually still scale it and do whatever you want to do to it with the aid of the move tool that we've learned earlier. And so the last tool we want to learn, so we're going to group this, just name it the magnetic lasso tool, magnetic lasso. Okay, so that is it, and then we're going to hide it, and we're going to try the last lasso tool, which is the one that gives us a complete control. That's the polygonal lasso tool. For the polygonal lasso tool, it gives us the opportunity to be able to check every angle of the polygon. Now don't forget, I taught you how to zoom by simply not clicking the zoom tool, but you just use your scroll wheel. If you've not done that, refer to the first and second lecture so you can be able to address that. So you zoom closely, and then we click to start, and we move and click, as opposed to the other ones you just click once and move, it selects for you. For this, you define the edges of the very subject you want to pick, okay, and you move, you click, and you move. So by the time you move too much before you click, it's gonna make it to be unrealistic. For example, if I should click this way, you see somewhere around this spot it's becoming an angle and it's not really showing the curve. So there's a need to click at intervals that are closer to each other, so you can be able to follow the very shape of the subject you are tracing, okay. So you can go forward, click and move, click and move, click and move, click and move, like that. So that's what you're going to do till you get to the end of the subject, okay. Click and move, click and move, okay. From time to time you might want to zoom in and zoom out, so you can press plus on your keyboard, okay, and then it zooms in and you can also press minus on your keyboard and it zooms out. Okay, so you can do that. So click and move, click and move. So let's zoom out again with minus, like I said. So that's too far, so you want to see closely, you zoom in. Okay, and then you come, you click and move, click and move. So by clicking, you are anchoring it at a particular point in order to preserve the shape you intend to capture. Okay, so let's do that. Click and move, click and move. Now when you do this, most of the times it's advisable you select inwards into the subject, not outwards, because when you select outwards, the pixels outside the very subject could be selected and it won't look too good. So you select a little inwards. Now when you have errors in this, you can always minus. Okay, you can come here and let's say, for example, this is actually too inwards. We can minus this. I've taught you how to minus and add. It applies to this and several of them. Okay, and now this is a mistake, so it's supposed to be a plus, not a minus, right? So it's supposed to be a plus, so I should be adding and not subtracting. Okay, so I've done that, and then I can also come here and add. So let's assume I made a mistake by adding, and then I added a little more. All right, so I can still add this and then come back and subtract that mistake. Okay, so let's try to fix that error. So we come to the minus and then pick in minus. Okay, I expect you to take your time and practice after this very class. Practice, practice, practice. So when we have this, we feather, okay, and then we duplicate. Now feathering depends on whatever you are cropping. So you move it upwards. I also showed you the shortcuts to moving the layers up and down. So by the time you compare, this is polygonal Lasso Tool, polygon. I just save it as polygon. Okay, so we would want to compare all three, and you discover that this is the most beautiful, is the most perfect. The reason is simply because we've been able to take our time to pick, you know, following the pixels just exactly as we want the subject to be. So you would want to come. So let's assume you want to add a backdrop. Let's assume you want to add a backdrop, okay? So let's assume you want to add a backdrop to this very image. We could actually go look for the backdrop, just like I told you. Open the backdrop by either clicking and dragging or right clicking and opening. Now when we drop it, it becomes a smart object, remember? So we can use it that way and add different functions to it. Now we have changed a beautiful background just simply using the selection tool. Now you can go ahead to modify it all the more, balance the temperatures and all of that, but then we won't be doing that right here. We're just trying to show you how to use this tool. Okay, that brings us to the end of this class. I expect you to take your time and practice. Okay, see you in the next class.